Ash, sounds like discrimination to me. In fact, I've prepared against your discriminatory assessments on mental health. The DDA, Disability Discrimination Act, generally makes it against the law to discriminate against a person because of disability when providing insurance and superannuation. This covers all forms of general, health and life insurance. So we come into the life insurance category, issued by registered insurers and includes underwriting and non-underwritten applications and policies issued by insurers. If legislation says that insurers can't discriminate against people, then how can we have mental health exclusions? Isn't that discriminatory?
They have a little clause in there for insurers as well. So they recognise that some discrimination is required, some is necessary. And they say so long as the insurers can back it up with reasonable, reliable data, then there is some level of discrimination, if we'll call it that is warranted so that they can assess the risk of what it would be for someone to claim.
Hey there, today we are doing a deep dive on a very big topic. We're talking about mental health and its impact on insurance. Today I've got Ash joining me for this deep dive. Thanks for joining me, Ash.
No worries, Phil. Good to be here.
So we are going to be talking about mental health and its impact on insurance. So let's set the table. What are we talking about when it comes to mental health? What is mental health?
Obviously, we're not medical practitioners, we're just advisors. But from the lens of insurance, mental health is generally anything that's affecting your mental health. So grief, stress at work, the more obvious things, anxiety, depression, PTSD, the likes.
Yeah. So everything, it's all in one bucket. So when we talk about mental health in this, obviously there's spectrums and scales of, its impact on your ability to work, and not at all, but we're putting it all together, even though we know that that's not how mental health works.
Yes.
So
the insurance lens of mental health is very different to the doctor's lens of mental health.
Correct. So let's start off talking about what is the community perception on how insurers should view mental health when it comes to insurance applications?
Yeah, so Canstar did an interesting survey. They went out to about 1,000 people and they asked them a few questions just to gauge what the community perception is. So one of the things they were asking is if people thought that seeing a doctor for your mental health, if they thought that was likely to affect their ability to get insurance. And 43% of people said they didn't think that seeing a doctor for mental health would. Some of the other stats from the report was that 50% of people were less likely to seek help or apply for cover if they thought the mental health symptoms would affect their ability for cover. And then the other interesting stat from that I found was that 38% of people were saying, considering not disclosing any mental health symptoms on their application, which that one's a bit of a no-no.
Yeah, but I mean, look, understanding its impact on an insurance application, obviously we don't encourage it and we strongly discourage it, but you can understand why the community perception is there. If it's going to impact it, should I be talking about this?
It definitely, from the stats that I was looking at, it communicated to me there was a lack of education and understanding about what an impact would look like. I think most people, when they hear that mental health is going to affect their insurance, they probably think that's going to mean a decline, no cover available at all. Not realising as well that a mental health exclusion just means that you're unable to work. If you're unable to work due to mental health, that's going to affect your income protection, your TPD, if you were to have an exclusion. But you would still have access to income protection and TPD, likely for if you couldn't work because of your back or your leg or anything at all.
All right, so let's go deep into that. How does mental health, a history of mental health, have an impact on an insurance application?
Yeah, so it is one of those questions where the overarching answer is it depends. But I guess going into different particular symptoms that we see. So if you were to have, say, grief, it depends on a few different factors. So the insurer is going to look at the recency as well as how long you experience the symptoms for. So drilling down just on grief, we found that the insurers are still able to offer you cover most of the time, and they're going to either have a mental health exclusion or standard rates. So standard rates means no exclusions or loadings are being applied.
Yeah.
The things the insurers are looking at with any sort of mental health condition is how long it's been since you last had symptoms. And so for most symptoms, it's between 1 to 5 years, and the terms are going to change of whether it's a loading or standard rates being applied. Potentially could be a decline depending on the severity. That's the other sort of thing that they're looking at. They're looking at how long it's been, if the symptoms are still ongoing, and then they're looking at what those particular symptoms are.
Yeah, and so when it comes to an exclusion, so the policies that we look at is, the 4 ones: life insurance, disability insurance, TPD, income protection, and trauma insurance. Is it an exclusion on all of those, or is it some of the policies that have the exclusion? Like, what does that look like?
For the most part, it's generally affecting the TPD, the total and permanent disability, and the income protection, because mental health is most likely to affect your ability to work as opposed to the ability to claim on a life cover or trauma cover. So trauma cover, that's based off of being diagnosed with a serious illness. Mental health generally isn't affecting the ability for trauma cover.
Yeah.
Life cover can be affected sometimes if you have experienced really severe symptoms really recently, then life cover could be affected. And generally, if life cover is not available for those reasons, none of the cover is. But that's quite rare. That's a very extreme symptoms you've experienced.
Yeah, and the insurer won't put a mental health exclusion on the life cover. They will just decline the cover outright. So they can just say, hey, we're not going to offer cover because of the severity of what's going on. And that's not, it's not grief or anything like that. It's really severe mental health. And so one question that we get a lot is like, do I need to be diagnosed? Like, I'm not diagnosed, but I have symptoms of mental health conditions, but I haven't gotten a formal diagnosis. Is that important? Does that matter?
The key thing is if it's written down there somewhere that you've seen a doctor, if you've spoken to a psychologist, if you've used your work, what's called EAP, Employee Assistance Program, if you've used any of those sorts of things for any assistance at all regarding your mental health, even if it was just a little bit of stress at work, but that was only a few weeks ago, these sorts of things are likely to result in some sort of mental health disclosure being required.
Yeah. Dive deep on these exclusions and how they work. So if I've had a long-term history of a mental health condition, that will likely impact the cover. But if something happened 10 years ago and I've had no issues since, does that still mean I'm going to get an exclusion on these policies?
Yeah, so if you've had the symptoms for a really long time and they're not experienced them for a little while, normally the insurers are going to err on the side of that being more risky because you have had a long history in the past, whereas your other situation where you experienced something about 10 years ago, haven't had any symptoms since, it's unlikely that's going to affect your ability to take out cover with standard rates.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, some insurers have some funky rules. Like sometimes it's just computer says no, which is really annoying because I looked at one the other day. Had a client who had a symptom in 2014 and then a symptom in 2017 of something very mild. And I looked at it going, what the heck? They're trying to put a mental health exclusion on it, this one company. And I went back to them and said, this impacts our client's ability to recommend your insurance company. And the answer basically was, yeah, computer says no. because it was technically
it's
a
recurring.
reoccurrence of the symptom. Then that meant that even though it was so long ago, now in that situation, I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you, do all insurance companies have the exact same rules? Like computer says no for one insurance company. Does that mean everyone has the same rule?
No, they all have their own different underwriting requirements. And so just because one insurer is saying no, another insurer might say yes with a mental health exclusion, another might say yes, no worries at all.
Yeah. And yeah, in this situation, the reason why I argued, because I was grumpy with this underwriter and I was like, I thought they just gave us a lazy response. And so I was like pushing back to be like, all insurance companies want to have our clients insured with them because they're good clients, they're young and healthy. And I said, well, everyone else is not putting a mental health exclusion on and you're the only one who is. That's going to impact our ability to work in the future.
I had a similar
The answer
scenario.
was computer says right. Computer says no.
I had a client who was experiencing stress because of uni, and then a few years later COVID happened, so there was stress again, and then nothing since the very beginning of COVID, and still the insurers were saying No.
And was that everyone in that situation?
Everyone was
or?
saying mental health exclusion. I was quite surprised about that because COVID's now been more than 5 years.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, and it is interesting. These underwriting decisions, they do change over time. Like we talk about 2 years ago, one company was in that same scenario would have been okay with it, but now they've tightened up on their decision making. Sometimes when we talk to our clients about these are the decisions, the outcomes, it's not the case forever. And if you come back to us in 3 years' time, it may be very different, even though the symptoms or the history may be the same, either because of time or because literally the insurance company has changed their philosophy. Now it could be worse, but it could be better.
Yeah, the landscape's definitely forever changing.
So, Ash, sounds like discrimination to me. In fact, I've prepared against your discriminatory assessments on mental health. So, the Disability Discrimination Act talks about it. There's an article that says the guidelines for providers of insurance and superannuation under Disability Discrimination Act 2016. I've even got the date of the legislation.
You've ready.
Yeah, I'm ready to go. It says the DDA, Disability Discrimination Act, generally makes it against the law to discriminate against a person because of disability when providing insurance and superannuation. This covers all forms of general, health and life insurance. So we come into the life insurance category, issued by registered insurers and includes underwriting and non-underwritten applications and policies issued by insurers. If legislation says that insurers can't discriminate against people, then how can we have mental health exclusions? Isn't that discriminatory?
They have a little clause in there for insurers as well. So they recognise that some discrimination is required, some is necessary. And they say so long as the insurers can back it up with reasonable, reliable data, then there is some level of discrimination, if we'll call it that is warranted so that they can assess the risk of what it would be for someone to claim. So the important thing to note with insurance is the insurers they're not just being discriminatory, they are taking into consideration what the risk of you claiming is. If you have experienced symptoms in the past compared to someone who hasn't had any symptoms at all or treatments, it's a high likelihood that you could claim.
Yeah. And as you said, there is, as long as they can statistically back up their discrimination, they can discriminate. And we all, instinctively understand insurance. If I live in a really dodgy suburb and I get car insurance and all the cars are getting, hijacked and stolen, well, the premiums are going to be more expensive. And that's discrimination because based on where I live, if I have a high-risk occupation, I'm a builder, I'm going to get charged more premiums than if I sit at a desk and just get fat all day like I do. So those are the discrimination decisions that all insurers have, and every insurance policy has a pricing mechanism that is discriminatory. And as you said, unfortunately, if there is a history of mental health condition and that can be proven that has an impact on claims rates in the future, people with a history, then they can make these judgment calls, unfortunately. So talking about claims, talking about proving discrimination, how does mental health have an impact on claims?
Yeah, mental health is a big topic in the claims world, particularly around total and permanent disability cover. There's been a lot of chat in the industry from the industry bodies, FAAA talking about it, the insurance companies working out what they're going to do, and then Carly, Council of Australian Life Insurers?
Nailed it. Yeah, you got it much quicker than I ever would have.
They worked with KPMG to collate data from the last 10 years of how mental health has been affecting and changing the different claims for income protection and TPD. So what they've noticed is that the average age of someone claiming for mental health on total and permanent disability and income protection has decreased by 2.5 years. So it was about 48 and now it's about 46. So people are claiming younger for mental health. So it means they're leaving the workforce earlier. And if you're leaving the workforce earlier, it means you're going to need to be funded for longer. So these TPD claims are getting more and more expensive as well. Back in 2013, the claims amount in total for mental health was 37 million for the age bracket of 30s to 40s. Now the age bracket of 30s to 40s, their mental health claims are costing 138 million.
Yeah, wow.
So a huge increase. I think it's 730%. So it's costing more, it's taking longer, people claiming on income protection. So the average income protection claim used to be 4.5 years. Now it's 5.8 years, I think it said. Whereas compared to a physical ailment causing you to be out, the average time out of the workforce is 5 years. So people are out of the workforce longer as a result of mental health compared to a physical ailment that's stopping them from working, which I thought was quite curious.
Sorry, Go, you got more stats. I'm loving these stats. I'm such a stat geek, so keep them coming.
The other interesting factor was that women and men for income protection related claims was about the same amount of time, but 58% more men were unable to work permanently as a result of mental health compared to women.
Yeah, right.
Which I found quite interesting. It then went on to explain that more women receive mental health care compared to men, so I would imagine that's a contributing factor to getting you back into the workforce sooner.
And look, I'm not a social scientist, and I'm not going to posit to understand why this is the case. So this is all about its impact on insurance. But I said all that, and I'm about to have a guess of why it's happening. I think mental health is becoming more commonly accepted as something that's reasonable. Like back in the day it was something that to be ashamed of, and the idea of I'm not tough if I have a mental health condition, and these days that's not as much the case, and so therefore to be able to then go and take time out of the workforce because of mental health is now becoming more common because it's more accepted, because if I've clearly broken my leg and I'm a builder, I can't work, but mental health, no one can see it. It's an unseeable kind of condition. So I think that has helped people be able to recover and get better. But when an insurance company is paying for that, it comes into its impact on insurance. And so, this societal change that's positive and something that we should be, happy about and glad that it is more acceptable, means that the insurers are paying for it. And that's really where we're having this conversation about it. And that's why mental health exclusions, when I started, I rarely saw it. I saw someone, the first mental health exclusion I saw was someone got a divorce and had got prescribed medication but didn't take it. Because of going through a divorce, and he got a mental health exclusion, and I was shocked. The advisor I was working with was shocked. Well, I've never seen this before.
Wow.
But now
that's not been my experience at all.
Yeah,
it's
you see it
almost rare when I talk to someone without mental health exclusion.
Yeah, and so it is a difficult thing the insurers are working through. So talk to me about like other type of covers, so like workplace compensation schemes. Like how are they thinking about it? Because they've got the ability to move and change.
Yeah. So work cover, the cover particularly in Victoria, they've been paying close attention to this because it has been affecting the amount of payouts that they're having to make. And so as a result, they've changed their definition for what mental injury is. And in this definition, it now means that you cannot claim on work cover, which is only paying out if you are unable to work as a result of something in your workplace. It doesn't pay out now if you are unable to work as a result of heightened stress just from your normal duties. This isn't covering frontline workers, so if you're a paramedic, policeman, the same thresholds don't exist. Yeah. But if I was feeling snowed under by my emails and deadlines, that sort of thing, I wouldn't be able to claim on work cover.
Yes, I mean there's a change, and they've got the ability to make the change. Personal insurance contracts, if as I said, the policies that I set up 10-12 years ago when I started that didn't have mental health exclusions, that today they would put a mental health exclusion, the insurer can't go back and change that. They can't change their mind and say, actually, we're going to make it harder to claim. They're all baked in, and they're dealing with the claims on that. So they've got to think about, okay, what do we need to change moving forward? So, one common thing you did mention in one of your many stats, which as I said, I'm a stat geek and love it, and I wrote it down. You said 38% of people in that Canstar survey said that they would just not disclose a
Yeah.
mental health condition. So talk about that.
Definitely understand the thought process there. Unfortunately, if you don't disclose today and you do need to make a claim down the line, it is going to come back to bite you. What happens at claim time is the insurers get access to all of your health records. And so they'll have a look through all of that. And if they see that you have seen a psychologist in the past and you didn't disclose this at application time, then it could have an impact on your claim. It potentially, the very worst case scenario is that you don't get your claim at all out.
Yeah, and I mean, non-disclosure is, worst case is actually the insurer, if they find out within 3 years, they can just void your contract, say, no, you don't have a policy anymore. And then if something's happened in that meantime, or you need to go and claim, something's happened, then you may be uninsurable. So definitely don't non-disclose. Talk to an insurance advisor who specialises in insurance and talk about, as we talked about earlier, there are different assessments based on the different insurers. So someone who works across a broad brush of insurers, speak to an advisor because don't non-disclose. Don't be a silly sausage.
And if perhaps you're getting an exclusion today, it doesn't mean that exclusion has to be there forever. Your mental health, everything changes. So that could always potentially be reviewable.
Yeah. And so, okay, talk to me about that in terms of if I took out my policy, what did I take mine out? 2012, I think. If I have a mental health condition, do I need to go and tell the insurer about that?
Your policy was taken out 2012.
Yeah.
There was
No
nothing
mental health
going on
condition
then.
before, yeah.
Something's come up now. There's no need to disclose and make your contract worse. The insurers can't make your contract worse in that regards. But if you had a mental health condition back then and those symptoms and treatments have ceased and have for a prolonged period, then we could potentially look at, if there was an exclusion, getting rid of that exclusion.
Yeah, cool. Good. Good to hear. All right, now we're talking about claims and this KPMG report talks about it's expensive from an insurer's point of view. You said $37 million from that cohort. Now it's $138 million. All insurance policyholders will be paying for that because they just increase the premiums to cover those costs. What are some things that are coming on in the future? How will insurers think about managing these potential future claims?
Yeah, it's definitely something that the insurers are thinking about. There seem to be a few avenues that are being considered, but the main idea that seems to be landing is potentially setting up so that specifically for mental health conditions, a TPD claim, instead of paying out the one lump sum at one time, it would pay out in installments. And so, as I was saying before, the mental health claims normally has people out of the workforce for a bit over 5 years. What some of the insurers are looking at is a 5-year installment. So you're getting 20% each year, getting assessed at every step of the way to find out if you're still unable to work ever again. The difficulty with mental health compared to, that broken leg example is that it is a lot more subjective, trying to work out if you could ever enter the workforce again, what sort of capacity you're entering the workforce, if it is that own occupation definition that you have for your TPD. And so it's that installment process would, I suppose, give the insurer more avenues to assess that likelihood of returning to work without the person having access to no funds.
Yeah.
Because if you're unable to work due to your mental health, then having the financial impacts of not working would probably only compound on what's already a stressful time. So it's important to acknowledge that access to funds makes it easier for you to be able to return to work without the insurers having to pay out $1 million+.
Yeah. And mental health, disability, the contract, it's so definite. You're either definitely totally and permanently disabled or you're definitely not. There isn't a mechanism to decide whether we will or whether we won't. So that's why they are talking about, because there are mental health claimants. Like insurers have an income protection policy and a TPD. Sometimes in their own data, they reflect back on their data and they go, we paid someone for a TPD, any occupation TPD, and their income protection ceased after 3 years because now they're back at work. So were they TPD really? Well, definitionally, almost got that word out. you understand what I mean. Under the definitions, no, they're not TBD because they're back at work under any occupation. And so that's where they're leaning on it and go, how do we be creative about making sure people get the claim when they need it, because that's important, but protecting the insurance pool, because at the end of the day, insurance is a community product. We all put money in together. If you need it because you need a claim because you can never go back to work, well, my premiums pay for that. And so it's important to protect that as a community. And the other thing is, some people throw out is, why don't insurance companies just get rid of mental health out of their contracts completely? Do you kind of know why they do or why they don't consider that?
No, but from my understanding, about 5 years ago, there was the ability to put a blanket mental health exclusion on, and then that would make the premiums cheaper. But that product has since left the market.
Yes.
What happened there?
Yeah, so income protection used to be able to select saying, I want to reduce my premiums and not have an option to claim on mental health. The reason it's no longer around is because no one used it. You know, advisors, I'd be terrified to use that for any of our clients, even if they don't have symptoms or treatments. Knowing the data and the statistics on mental health, I'm not going to tell any of my clients to claim on that because to tick that button. But the other reason is, and it comes back to this conversation about discrimination, the reason they can't do a blanket rule is because that is discriminatory. Discriminating against mental health as a blanket rule to not allow mental health claims. I mean, look, work cover is doing it.
I suppose the difference with work cover is mental health is still available. For example, it was the article I was reading was saying if you are unable to work in your workplace because of workplace bullying and that was affecting your mental health, then it's still available. They're just tightening their definition of what a mental health injury looks like.
That's right, yeah. And so, yeah, with the private life insurance providers, like they do have a code of practice that says that they can't do it and they don't want to do it. And it just opens them up to saying, well, there's no, like on an individual basis, not being able to provide mental health claims can be seen as discriminatory. But yeah, that's why they're just not doing it, because it's against kind of their code of practice and it's kind of against community expectation. People want to be covered for mental health as well, and knowing that there may be an exclusion, but at least if you don't have any treatment symptoms in the past, you will be covered for it.
Oh man, that's a stat that I've definitely seen before, how many people expect to be covered for mental health, but I didn't collect that one for today.
Yeah, well, you gave us plenty. So I guess, to wrap this up, this has been super helpful and really informative, but are there any kind of main takeaways that you want people to kind of go away from watching this, and what should we take away from it?
Well, it's important to remember that if you have been and seen a psychologist for mental health reasons, that it doesn't just straight up mean that cover isn't available for you. And if you do have a mental health exclusion, it doesn't mean you should just not get income protection at all. It's definitely not an all or nothing situation. And whatever is set today doesn't mean that it's going to be that for the rest of your lifetime of holding the policy.
Yeah. And I guess my main takeaway is two things. Get insurance. Of course, I'm going to say that. We're conflicted. But get insurance set up, number one. And number two, don't ever and never, ever, ever put off getting treatment for any condition, mental health especially, but any condition, because you're like, oh, it might impact my insurance policy in the future. That's okay. That's where you work with a professional to manage, okay, what can we do about it? Like some cover is better than no cover, but don't ever put off any treatment for anything that you may need just to sort out your insurance. Insurance is important. It's not the most important thing. No,
and it's important to make sure that you are getting the cover if you can get the cover, and you are getting the treatment if you can get the treatment, because in both of those situations, if you just put them off, you're likely to only be worse off in the future. One thing with the getting of cover is with the work cover, that definition changing, you wouldn't want to be relying on that. If you don't have any history of mental health conditions, well, now the work cover isn't available to anyone really in the same capacity. You may have group cover. Generally, that's very small amounts, so that's not going to cover you for very much. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome, cover. Ash. This has been great. Thank you very much for doing this deep dive.
Thanks, Bill.